What is up, everyone, and welcome back to some more of the Shell Part 3. This time, for sure, I'm finishing it, alright? Hopefully I'm not sitting here for another 9 hours like last time, but I don't think it's going to take that long. Looking at the minimal amount of stuff that's left here in the guide, I don't think it's going to take that long. So we are on February 27th, which is essentially the last day before you get locked into an ending, right? But now there should be a new choice towards the end. I'm guessing it's during the trade-off with Rokshki. There's going to be like some kind of choice that happens. I'm not going to go for the true ending right away, because it says here in the guide, select this option to get the true ending, but then it also says, however, I highly recommend also getting the other major ending by making the other final choice for more Shell Part 2 closure, which that kind of catches my interest. So we're gonna go for not the right answer our first time around here, so we can get this other ending. But then we'll come through and we'll get the true ending and we'll wrap it all up. And like I said, hopefully this doesn't take 9 hours again. I have the time for it, I just don't want to spend that much time on it. So yeah, let's skip to new choices. Okay, so here's the first of our new choices, and yes, it's during the Rokshki handoff. Do we draw the gun on him and give him what he wants, or do we grin and bear it? And the correct answer is to grin and bear it, obviously. Because drawing the gun is just going to get us where we were last time. Don't let him rile you up. I swallowed my anger and continued pushing the cart. Just a little further, and then you have to catch him off guard. I called out to Rokshki when I was about 3 meters away from him. That was about as close as I could get without rousing his guard. Rokshki raised an eyebrow as if to express he was surprised. I seriously didn't know what he was getting at. Rokshki glanced at Iroha. Bullshit. This guy's penchant for sophistry clearly hadn't waned a bit in the last 6 years, that was for sure. I muttered that without even thinking. Rokshki grinned. I didn't believe him for a second. There was no way in hell this guy didn't have some plan for getting out of here with Girl and Shell in tow. I just knew it. Still, Iroha's safety came first. Rokshki shook the rope to illustrate his point. Now. Took a step to the side, raised my hands, and gave Girl and Shell a little push on the shoulder. At that moment, I saw Rokshki's face freeze in terror for the first time in my life as he witnessed the statue tipping over. Oh, shit. Rokshki made a mad dash for the statue, reaching out both his hands in an attempt to catch it, dropping the rope in the process. Yaginuma immediately barked out an order. Numerous shapes slithered in the darkness. Iroha! Sprinted over to Iroha as she fell toward the ground. I crashed face up into the ground with Iroha safely in my arms just as a shadowy figure, a cop, leaped over us. The darkness rattled with Rokshki's cackling. He was holding Misa's severed head in his hands, as numerous offers pinned him to the ground. Surrounded by the plaster of the broken statue. No shit. I untied Iroha as I responded to Rokshki. Yaginuma stood before Rokshki, the latter restrained and dragged up by a pair of officers flanking him.
この空の少女像は以前から作らせていてね。お前に一杯食わせることができて
It was Seimazono who made this fake statue in Yaginuma's... Oh! Oh, fuck. Yeah, because when Masaki went to tell her that, you know, her daughter turned safely, she's like, yeah, they're not, or no, was it Rage you said something? I forget who said something, but they was like, I'm surprised they didn't give you a death sentence. She's like, oh no, I'm working as an art restorer. They had me working on Girl and Shell. I'm also working on, and then Yaginuma shows up. He's like, easy there. Nah, and of course, because she's the fucking prodigy that she is, she could make a fake because it's like Roshi even mentioned at some point, he's like, there should be no one more versed in Shinzo Mamiya's work than Stella, right? So the fact that she was able to trick Stella is a testament to her skill. So of course, if there's anyone who could possibly imitate the statue to a degree that would fool Roshi, it would be Sei. That's wild. The task proved to be so daunting that it had taken several years for even a master forger such as her to complete. That's entirely why why we had to jump ahead so many years. Wow. In the end, I couldn't see so much as a single difference between it and the original.
本物のミサはまだ米国ですか？答える必要はない。
Yaginuma wasn't having any of Urotsuki's shit. That said, he'd let me in on the secret. The real Girl and Shell statue made from Misa's corpse was still in the USA, just as Urotsuki suspected. But while they had indeed managed to track it down due to an inquiry made by the Americans, the Japanese government had failed to secure its return from them. Just then, Yaginuma procured a pair of handcuffs.
6時17分。
And did the honors of cuffing Urotsuki himself.
もう二度と塀の外には出られないと思え。もう未練はありませんよ。作り物とはいえ、ミサに会えたのですから。
Urotsuki chuckled.
どうにも嘘くせえな。
A squad of officers led by Ozumi drew near. Toji was right there with them.
おうレイジ、そっちは大丈夫か？
ああ。怪我はないかい。
Yora shook her head as we held on to each other.
佐藤巡査を三枝家に待機させてある。すぐに連絡が行くはずだ。
わかった。当時、ちょっとこの子を預かってくれ。
わかった。
I handed Yora over to Toji for the time being before turning back to Urotsuki.
さて、これからどうするつもりだ？
どうするも何も何もできないとは思いませんか？
Urotsuki shrugged, still held down on both sides by the pair of officers.
まだ何か隠していそうだからな。
仲間がいるかもしれん。
Ozumi scanned the darkness around us.
仲間ですか。
お前が使うのは仲間ではなく、弱みを握って一方的に操れる奴隷だろう。
Urotsuki smirked.
たとえそうであっても、人間である以上、意のままに操れるということはありませんからね。
So it's safe to assume he's working alone on this then.
直りは黒や直りはいなかったんですか？
Masaki, who'd been studying the broken statue thus far, suddenly chimed in.
会いに行くと、
あなたとは調布で会っているかもしれん。
確かにあの頃、ひな神を名乗った方がいましたね。
きっとそれです。
Urotsuki chuckled.
会いに行くとどこにいるかは存じていません。ですが、彼は残してきたと言っていた覚えがあります。
残してきた。
So apparently the true ending is to stop him, but to get closure is to let him. Okay. Okay. So we're gonna bust ourselves a nice little save here. Go off, Masaki. I had no place came between Masaki and Naori Kuroya. Their issues were theirs alone. But that said,
さき。
Yura was here right now. She could very well be what Naori Kuroya had bequeathed, so to speak.
今度は絶対に逃がさねえからな。連れて行け！
The officers took action on Uozumi's command. They surrounded Urotsuki in on one big huddle like bodyguards protecting a VIP before escorting him toward their vehicles.
随分と素直だ。
Yaginuma turned from Urotsuki to me.
諦めたのだと思いますよ。頼みの綱だったはずの米軍将校とのつながりも断たれたことですし。
頼みの綱からの少女像を預けただけじゃないのか。
どうやら亡命も視野に入れていたようです。今回空の少女像の返還を交渉していた時に出てきた話だそうですが、
Yaginuma snorted.
あちらは六式と一切関わるつもりがないらしく、
Urotsuki had probably realized that himself as soon as he discovered the real girl and shell statue wasn't present.
政治犯ならばともかく、奴はただの凶悪犯ですからね。
本物のからの少女像とともに。
それを阻止できただけでも万々歳ですよ。前回のようなヘマを犯すつもりはありませんから。
それは本当に頼むぜ。
They'd have his hide if he ever let Urotsuki escape again.
では僕は後処理をしなければなりませんので。ああ先輩、あの子を自宅まで送り届けてやってください。
Yaginuma pointed at Iraha.
まさきには空の少女像の片付けがありますから。
わかったよ。
In theory, I probably should have been taking her straight to the hospital instead, but that was her parents' job. Me, I just wanted to bring her back into their loving arms as soon as possible. Iraha skipped over to me after Yaginuma had a word with her and Toji.
おじさん、
帰るかい。
Ah, ha ha. Iraha nodded and offered her hand. Though I hesitated for a second, I took it. Her small warm hand fit snugly in my own. I did it, Doko. I kept my promise. The setting sun hovering above in a sky colored in hues of purple cast our shadows linked as one. And so it was against its light that Iraha and I headed for my car, hand in hand. That's just fucking nice. Though the Saigasa residence wasn't all that far from the airfield, I drove slowly and quietly, parked right outside the house. A black squad car was already waiting there, parked as inconspicuously as possible.
着いたよ。
Turned to the passenger seat and called out to Iraha. Iraha snored quietly. No surprise she'd fallen asleep after what a taxing day she'd had. Couldn't bring myself to wake her. Instead, I just sat there and took a long, hard look at her face. The long eyelashes were very much inherited from her. Even the look on their faces as they slept was identical. Turned around after hearing a knock on the driver's door. Ayame was standing outside.
時坂先生の車が見えたものですから。
She looked inside after I opened the
こ
window.
うしてみると、本当に朽木先輩に似て。
Ayame went around, opened the passenger door, and jostled Iraha
着
awake.
きましたよ。
Iraha gasped when she saw her house. Mr. and Mrs. Saigasa stepped out of the front door a moment later. Iraha took off running. Yes, this is the right decision. She should be with parents who've always been around to love and take care of her. Ayame approached me after I exited the car.
寂しいんですか。
This is for the best, Reiji. And for a while I just stood there, watching from afar as Iraha hugged her mother and wept in her arms. Masuki took a seat in his apartment upon returning home after the grand finale of the case, arms folded in contemplation. Large brown envelope sat before him. Within it lay the manuscript for The Girl of Eden. That was the first thing that had come to his mind. When Oroshiki mentioned that Naori had bequeathed something. Masuki slid the manuscript out of the envelope. The pages were drowning Naori's writing. Is there some sort of secret in this? If so, then perhaps it points to his whereabouts. However, it appeared to be an ordinary novel as far as Masuki could tell. No notes written between the margins, no numbers, nothing. I see. The reason why this isn't a true ending, right, is because now Masuki's taken on his own obsession, right? Whereas if, we insist that he lets it go, Muskie pored over every last word in hopes they somehow concealed a location, but all the proper nouns in the story were non-Japanese. Where was Naori planning to go? Suddenly there was a knock on the door.
Hi.
Though perplexed by who would be visiting him at this hour, Muskie got up and answered the door. It's probably Yukari.
こんばんは。
Damn, who could have guessed? Yukari was standing outside with a grocery bag in his hand.
あれどうしたんだい？
きっと夕飯はまだだろうと思いまして。
ああ、ありがとう。
Muskie saw shallots and bok choy sticking out of the bag.
鍋かい？
ええ、水炊きにするつもりです。
Muskie took the bag from Yukari and brought it into the
ご
kitchen.
飯の用意はしていないけど。
うどんを持ってきたので、後でいただきましょう。
Girl, yes. I hadn't got a chance to get a full sprite shot of this outfit yet. I love it. Yukari spotted the manuscript on the tea table shortly after removing her coat.
小説ですか？
預かっているものだよ。
見てしまってもよろしいのでしょうか？
内容を言いふらしたりしなければ問題ないと思うけど。
Though Muskie highly doubted he'd have to worry about that from Yukari.
そうだ。その原稿のどこかに何かが残されているらしいんだ。
何かが残されている？
Yukari cocked her head and breathed a quiet sigh.
まずは夕飯の用意を済ませてしまいましょうか。
それもそうだね。
After all, if she read first, they probably wouldn't have dinner ready until dawn. Yukari went to the kitchen, sliced up the vegetables like a professional chef as Muskie filled her in on the story behind the manuscript.
では、幼馴染の方が書かれたものなのですか？
本人から直接受け取ったわけではないけれどね。
Yukari placed an electric stove atop the tea table before setting a pot full of water atop it. Muskie put the manuscript back in the envelope and left it in a nearby corner.
私のお友達も小説を書いていましたから。
Yeah, you did. I miss Suzuko.
へえ。
However, Muskie shut his mouth before he could finish that sentence. For the grief now color, Yukari's features illustrated that it was a topic best left unpursued. Yeah. Man, I fucking miss Suzuko. Didn't know the details, but couldn't imagine it'd be a very happy tale. It isn't. Yukari dumped some kelp into the pot before turning the stove on. Next, she brought over vegetables on a plate.
では、少し読ませていただきますね。
Ah! Look at her, she's got glasses on! Ah! Girl! Dressed up looking like an Asian Velma Dinkley over here. For a little while, the only sounds in the otherwise silent room were flipping through the pages and the bubbling of
こ
water.
れは天国のお話なのですね。
そのようだね。前の話から続いているんじゃないかな。
前の？
Yukari cocked her head.
ああ。ずっと前に雑誌に掲載されて。
Yukari's eyes lit up when she heard
そ
that.
んなこともありましたね。
It was with those words that it finally came back to Masaki. He recalled how Yukari had seen that book too, and how the purported author was this very same individual who'd murdered her best friend. Yeah. Yeah.
ごめん。
Muskie bowed, lamentation weighing down on his heart.
いえ、昔のことですから。
Muskie looked up to find Yukari flashing him a sad smile.
そろそろ沸騰しますから。
Nodding, Muskie hurried to the kitchen and started prepping the chicken as asked. Muskie and Yukari finished their late dinner of udon.
ごちそうさまでした。
お粗末様です。
Yukari was about to get to her feet when Muskie held out his
片
hand.
付けは自分でするよ。
すみません。
Muskie carried the pot and plates over to the sink. He then cleaned them as he watched Yukari reading the rest of the manuscript.
残されているものの予想はついていますか？
多分いる場所だと思うけれど、確証はないね。
場所、エデン、天国。
Yeah. Yukari sighed. Muskie couldn't argue with her there. Those words would indeed be apt for describing Nari's destination if he'd been planning to die. However, the Girl of Eden was the third in a trilogy. All of them were themed off the 3 chapters of Dante's Divine Comedy, Inferno, Purgatorio, and Paradiso. So perhaps Naru possessed no such suicidal inclinations and had merely been following the pattern.
星を巡っていくのは星の王子様にもありましたね。それでも何のヒントにもなりませんね。
何か他のことで気になったものはないかな。
そうですね。最後の方の文章なのですが、
You could flip through the manuscript.
ここウサギの人形いなウサギの姿をした門番が立っていたなんですがなぜ人の型と書いたのでしょうか
Oh.
人型
First initial, planet to planet journey. First initial, oh. Hold on, first initial. Initial can also mean the first letter in a word. So the first initial in a word, perhaps. But what word could it be? Wait, planet to planet. First initial, planet to planet thus far. Ito. And see, that's what I was fucking assuming. When the story ended with her going back to Eden, I didn't say it out loud, but I genuinely thought, did he go back to Hitogata? Did he go back to where it all began? That is genuinely what I was thinking, and holy shit. Yeah, Hitogata.
これか
Hitogata. A number of people would probably have noticed the odd nature of that sentence, the majority likely dismissing it as scribal error missed in review. However, not only would even fewer have pieced together the riddle and solved it, but only some would know that Hitogata was the name of a place that rarely even appeared on maps these days, and merely a handful would know it as the author's hometown. Then, did he seriously go back home? Masuke hadn't been back to their mutual hometown since the Hinagamis had disowned him. Never seen word from anyone over there following the 6 years either. Nor did he even know what was going on with his family. The media had been all over them at the time, given the multiple incidents and scandals surrounding them, but the conclusion of that story had never really been reported in detail. Masuke himself hadn't made an effort to find out either. Just how heartless am I?
まさきさん
The concern in Yukari's voice brought Masuke back to his senses.
ああちょっと考え事を
そういうところ兄に似てきましたね
Yukari giggled.
いや時坂さんにはまだまだだよ
You probably would have figured this out much sooner than me, that's for certain.
何か思いついたのですか
ああ今日はもう無理だろうから明日確かめに行くよ
You never make the last train from Ueno, even if you departed this very second, unfortunately.
ありがとう君のおかげだよ
そんな私は何もしていませんよ
Yukari waved her hands as she beamed. See, Yukari always coming in clutch. She came in clutch with the bug leg, you know, when trying to track down where those girls are. She came in clutch, you know, in the second game because telling her about the case going on helped us, track down Yukiko and Tori. Like, Yukari always coming in clutch. I'm sure she did something in the first game to help us too. I can't quite remember because it's been a while, but I would not be surprised to be like, oh yeah, in the first game she did this and it really helped us with that. And like, yeah, I believe it.
それはきっとまさきさんご自身が導いたものです
そうかな
Masuke nodded even though he personally felt like he'd done no such thing. It was evening by the time Masuke arrived at Hitogata after leaving Tokyo via train first thing in the morning. The trip was certainly more convenient and faster than it had been just years ago, perhaps a boon of this newer era of economic prosperity. Masuke strolled through the snow-laden roads of the dying settlement in the mountains of Toyama. The incident 6 years ago had resulted in the fall of the Hinagami clan, who'd held Hitogata under their thumb for centuries. Not only that, but what remained of the once almighty family had apparently moved out of the settlement following their patriarch's arrest. Even Masuke, who had once been a member of that very clan and a key figure in those incidents, had been unaware of that. However, he was unfazed and unmoved by the news. It seemed it was still a chore to provoke an emotional response out of him, much like Dr. Watanuki had noted all those years ago. That wasn't to say he wasn't concerned for his former family at all. He still wanted to look into where they had moved once he had time, just like anyone would. But that was it. While a little sad to see his hometown on its last legs, it didn't tear him up or anything. After all, he'd known this day would come for Hitogata eventually. Nothing lasted forever. Masuke reached the center of the settlement without encountering anyone. The snow had only been shoveled wide enough for people to pass by one another. Masuke looked out to find the large house, the Hinagami estate. However, no one lived there by this point. Seemed a lot of the other houses had long since been abandoned too. Masuke scanned the area. At the edge of the intersection was the Kuroya clinic. However, the way there was completely buried in snow. Did the Kuroyas leave town as well?
リヒト
You? Mosky turned around upon hearing his old nickname.
ああ、久しぶり、若女将。
もう若くなんてないわ。
Yufutami smiled.
うちにすぐ来ると思ってたのに。
少しだけ見ておきたくてね。
見た目だけは何も変わってないわよ。人は少なくなってしまったけれど。
それでも旅館はやっているんだろ？
ええ。わざわざ泊まりに来る人もいないけれどね。
Shadows of gloom shrouded Yu's smile.
寒くなってきたから戻りましょう。
Snow in front of the inn had been completely swept away.
荷物持つって言ったのに。
軽いから平気さ。
Indeed, all I brought was a small briefcase.
お客様の荷物を預かるのも仕事なのよ。
Yu opened the front door. The old entryway looked exactly the way Masaki remembered it. A pair of wet boots down the edge of the dirt floor in the entryway.
他にも誰か泊まっているのかい？
泊まりに来る人なんていないって。
Yu wiped the snow off the hem of her kimono and went in.
お部屋は廊下の一番手前側でお願い。
ああ。
Masaki did as Yu asked after watching her go into a room by the front door. He entered the guest room and set his briefcase down. No sooner had he done that than did he throw himself to the floor. He lazily studied the stains decorating the ceiling. Even these haven't changed a bit. Nothing in Hitogata was different from when he'd grown up there. So much so that if someone had told him it had all been like this since long before he was even born, he'd believe them in a heartbeat.
失礼します。
You entered the room just then.
どうしたんだい？
Masaki sat
こ
up.
の部屋寒いでしょ。
You also dragged along an extension cord that was plugged into a socket out in the hallway.
もう火鉢という時代じゃないものね。
You flipped the power on. Shortly thereafter, the refractors reflected red light from the
あり
heater.
がとう。
このくらいのことは普通よ。
You sat up straight with that preface.
ただの気まぐれで来たわけではないのでしょ
Sharp. Not that Masaki had been planning to hide the truth from her, of course.
ナオちゃんがこっちに来ているかもしれない。
う。なおちゃん、
Yu's eyes widened.
ああ。ずっと足取りが終えていなかったんだけど。
そう。
You hung her head, then briefly shook it.
少なくとも私は見ていないわ。
そうか。
Never believed finding him would be such a simple affair, but still.
黒谷委員はどうなっているんだい？
病院はゆずるさんがひな神の本家と一緒に出て行ってしまったわ。
Given the state of the settlement when Masaki had last visited, didn't surprise him that his uncle Yuzuru had been forced to abandon the sinking ship that was Hitogata.
神社も弥生ちゃんの進学に合わせて一家で富山に出てしまったし。
本当に誰もいなくなってしまったんだね。
You sighed.
私もおばあちゃんが亡くなった時に出ていくつもりだったけれど。
でも助かったよ。君がいなかったらどうすることもできなかった。
私にはこのくらいしかできないから。
You grabbed the hem of her kimono and abruptly stood up.
夕飯の支度をしてくるわ。
You stepped out, leaving Masaki alone. Masaki sat cross-legged in front of the heater's red glow. There was a 10 yen coin under the table. Suppose a previous guest must have left that there by accident. Masaki picked it off the floor and set it atop the table. He hadn't come here to catch up with you. No, he was here to settle the score with Naoto Karaya once and for all. Furthermore, it wasn't like you saw every single person who visited Hitogata either. Meaning he may have slipped right past her. There are plenty of abandoned houses here too. So it wasn't out of the question that he might be hiding in one of them. No, that doesn't sound right. Naoto should have had no more reason to hide if he really was in Hitogata. Otherwise, it would have made sense for him to have left Masaki a clue to his location. Perhaps he's keeping an eye on me from someplace.
お待たせ。
You returned with a serving tray. Atop it were some rice, miso soup, and boiled
い
spinach.
ただきます。
Masaki picked up his chopsticks.
ねえ、リヒト。
なんだい？
もしもなおちゃんを見つけたら。
そういえばどうするかまでは
Masaki awkwardly scratched his head.
今はただ話がしたいかな。
捕まえに来たんじゃないの？
自分にはその資格がないから。
Masaki shook his head.
警察じゃないから。
違うんだ。僕も
どういうこと？
You cocked her head. I'll have to tell her about what I did, won't I?
戦争が終わってここに
仕草神社の。
Muskie raised his head.
ごめん。聞いてた。さっ
Don't
ちゃんの
fucking say
仇を討ったん
saddy
じ
at
ゃ
me
ないか
again, you sons of bitches.
そうじゃない。僕はそう思い込もうとしていたけれど
He hadn't cared one bit about revenge or anything like that while he'd been strangling the life out of Saya. Such thoughts had never even crossed his mind.
逃げ出して自首することもできず時効になって逮捕もしてもらえず
そうだったの。
You set a hand on Masaki's shoulder.
あなたを責めることはできないわ。うん。おそらく未びいきなのでしょうね。だから、なおちゃんのことだって。
You fumbled over her words.
ごめん。
No,
だか
you...
ら話がしたいんだ
Muskie faced you head on.
何？
教えてくれないか
You
さっ
gasped.
き玄関にあった長靴なおちゃんが使っていたんだろう
そんなこと。
You shook her head. However, the tone of her voice confirmed Masaki's suspicions.
僕がさやさんを殺したことだって今のなおちゃんだったら容易に想像がつくだろうし
リヒト、
You hung her head and shook it.
どうしてそういう勘だけは鋭いのよ。
ごめんなおちゃんは
リヒトが来るまではここにいたわ。来るって伝えたら他のところに移るって。
Somewhere else. At the old hideout. He's at the old hideout.
病院かな
Nope. The path to Kuroya Clinic had been buried in snow. While Mosky hadn't given it a good look, he didn't think he'd see any footprints there. And where? Where else could he be waiting for me? Hold on. That's it. Mosky rose to his feet.
リヒト、
思い当たるところがある
今から行くの？
多分待っているだろうから
ええ。
You nodded and got up, albeit somewhat hesitantly. It's at the old hideout. You eventually returned with a flashlight from her
あり
room.
がと
ねえ、リヒト、
うなんだい
ナオちゃんを必ず連れて帰ってきて。このままどこかに行ってしまいそうで。
ああ元よりそのつもりさ
Mosky nodded before taking the flashlight. He then flipped the switch several times to confirm the batteries weren't dead. Fortunately, it was providing him with plentiful light.
じゃあ行ってくる
ええ。
Snow was softly falling outside. It wasn't a blizzard, much less enough to actually blind Mosky. He could still barely make out anything with so few buildings actually lit up. That went for the Kuroya Clinic as well. If Naoto were hiding there, though, he likely wouldn't have turned on any lights lest he arouse suspicion. Mosky checked it out anyway just to be safe, finding the path there blocked by knee-high snow. There are no signs anyone had set foot there. So he wasn't here, huh? Figured as much. Mosky turned around with that thought, headed for the area known as Hidara-hina. In his heart of hearts, he was positive Naoto was just past there. Mosky pressed onward, following whatever traces of footprints he could find on the path. Yup. The old shed. See, this place hasn't changed all that much either. The charcoal-making hut stood mostly amidst the snow and no more disrepair than it had been in those days before the war. The footprints Mosky had followed led all the way to the door.
いるんだろうなおちゃん
Mosky called into the hut.
鍵はかかってないよ
Naoto's voice called back from behind the door. I knew it. He really is here. Mosky reached for the door. This is it. This is finally it. At last, I've caught up to you. Hey, buddy. The moment he stepped inside, a torrent of memories came back to him all at once. This place had served as the host for many delightful times Ayato, and his friends had spent together. Naori was sitting right there.
やあ、久しぶり。
Naori raised his hand as if he were simply greeting a former acquaintance at a school
一
reunion.
人で来たのかい？
若女将から聞いて知っているんだろ。もし僕が何人か連れてきていたら。
確かにそのつもりではあった。他の連中に邪魔はされたくなかったからね。
Naori chuckled quietly.
僕一人であれば簡単に逃げられるからかい。
それはあるかもしれないな。リヒトじゃなければ俺の話を聞いてくれそうにない。
そりゃ普通はまず身柄を確保しようとするだろうね。
Oski didn't imagine Naori would make a break for it after he'd gone to all the effort of leaving a clue to his whereabouts for him to decipher.
さて、何から話そうか。
Naori finally addressed the elephant in the room as though he were just making ordinary
時
chit-chat.
系列に沿って話していく方が分かりやすいかな。ただそうなると最初に話すべきはリヒト。
何があったのかは知っているんじゃないのか。
さやさんのことはね、ひな神と仕草とうちとで隠蔽したそうだけど、あれは気づかない方がどうかしてるさ。
そりゃその場から僕は逃げ出したからね。
Anyone with half a brain cell could have put two and two together. However, the settlement had instead pretended that the murder had never happened, and thus no one went hunting for Masaki.
だけど、すでに控訴事項は成立しているんだろう？
事件自体が表に出ていないんだ。僕がいくら言ったところで取り合ってはくれなかったよ。
Masaki hung his head and shook
だ
it.
からそんな僕にはナオちゃんを警察に突き出す権利なんてないんだよ。
俺は犯罪者でも犯罪者を裁く、いや、捕まえる権利はあると思うけれどね。
だから
そんな正義感はなかったよ。ただ邪魔だったからさ。
Fair enough. Now he openly admitted to it as if recounting the story of how he'd swatted a particularly pesky fly.
邪魔。
ああ、俺の目的のためには彼は必要なかったからね。
目的って。
Masaki recalled the sheep of Purgatorio, the story that Naori had written under the name of the very same man he'd killed.
人の名前であっても俺の文章だよ。別に名を売りたかったわけでもなし。
He seriously believes that, doesn't he?
ただそんなことだけのために。
もちろんそれだけではなかったよ。彼が連れてきた子を治療するのに邪魔だったんだ。
Toko Kuchiki. That was the name of the girl whose phantom Reiji had chased for years.
そう長くないことは分かっていた。ただ身ごもっていたから。
ナナコさんが。
あの人は自分で子供を産めないからね。生まれてくる子を放っておけなかったんだよ。
Justice for my girl Nanako.
俺もその前の実験で子供を多く死なせてしまっていたから、目の前で生まれようとしている命は救いたかった。
どうしてまだ生まれてきていない子を救おうとするのに桂木真は殺したんだよ。
I think it makes sense to me. He tried to save an unborn child, and Katsuragi was in the fucking way. And murder for the most selfish reason there was at that.
それはきっと七子に頼まれたからなんだろうな。
Naori nodded to himself as if he'd been convinced by his own
俺
words.
自身の望みはさっきも言った通り小説を発表することだった。
Perhaps that was Naori's own obsession.
それ以外のことはどうでもよかったんだ。
Naori scratched his head
要
bashfully.
するに俺のその他の部分は空っぽだったんだよ。
Is that why he was always so good at taking care of others?
赤ん坊を連れ去ったのもナナコさんに頼まれたという理由だけなのか。
ああ、彼女に危機が迫っていたからね。断る理由もなかったし。
He's twisted. Twisted to the core. The more I listened to Naori, the more aware Masaki grew of that epiphany. While Naori appeared sane on the outside, his train of thought was on all the wrong railways. He'd been so set in his ways and his convictions that he didn't care about anything else. Masaki couldn't understand that, since he'd never been obsessed the way Naori or Reiji had. However, it appeared to be a trait common to many who lived as slaves to their obsessions.
俺にとって七子は新曲に登場してくるベアトリーチェだったのかもしれない。
Naori suddenly derailed the conversation slightly. Beatrice had been Dante's first love, and one he deified.
だから彼女の希望を叶えたかったんだ。もっとも逃げている最中に人に預けてしまったけれどね。
調布にはどのくらいいたんだ。
5年近くはいたよ。赤ん坊を連れてあちこち移動するのはどうしても目立ってしまうからね。
Syguses.
その人とは前から知り合いだったのか。
いや、子連れでいた時に声をかけられたんだ。通報されるかもしれなかったが、何も聞かずに世話をしてくれてね。それでこの人たちだったら 赤ん坊を預けても問題ないだろうと判断したんだ。
自分で育てるつもりはなかっ
それが無茶なことは承知しているよ。目立つし、それに俺は子供があまり好きじゃない。
So Naoto was never attached to her then. I assumed as much.
それからはその近所に部屋を借りて生活していた。ちょうど開発が進んできて、よそからやってきた住人も多かったから目立つことはなかったよ。
た。でもすぐ近くで事件が発生した。
ああ、何の因果か。君たちが昔関わっていた事件によく似ていたね。その話は噂に聞いていたから、君らが来ることは分かっていた。
それですぐに部屋を引き払ったのか。置き土産を残して。
あそこで生活していて暇を持て余していたからね。前に書いたものも中途半端だったし、続きを書いてみたんだ。なんとなくここに帰ろうと考えていたから、それらしくヒントを入れてみたが、正直リヒトが気づいてくれるとは思わなかったよ。
Naoto laughed. The way he did was identical to how he'd done so as a boy. Thus,
なあ、なおちゃん、
Oski presented him with that offer.
僕もきちんと償いをする。だから
立場が全く違うよリヒト。君は事件そのものが表沙汰になっていない。明らかに罪の軽い君が俺を引っ張っていくのは。
Oski couldn't argue with that. What he'd done was basically offer his old friend a one-way ticket to hell with him, while his own was for a round trip.
じゃあこれからどうするんだい。
そうだな。もう何もすることが残っていないよ。それでも捕まるつもりはないよ。
Naoto's lips curled into a faint smile once
結
more.
果が分かっているのに、取り調べやなんだで同じようなことを何度も話さなければならないんだろう。それに七子や他の人たちにも面倒が及びそうだからね。
そんなのは。
Oski shook his head. He hated how utterly unconvincing and half-assed he'd sounded just then. He never won an argument against Naoto's eloquence before, and he doubted that changed or ever would.
だったらリヒトが俺を捕まえればいいだろう。それができないにしてもせめて応援を頼んでおくべきだったな。若女将にことづけを頼んでおけば通報くらいはしてくれるだろうに。
Now, you honestly have no idea how she feels about you. She would never turn you over to them. That's why I have to bring you back on my
帰
own.
ろう。なおちゃん、
なあリヒト、君がサヤさんを殺した後で誰かに自首することを勧められていたら素直に従っていたか。
それはあの時僕は。
だったら落ち着いた後で改めて出頭しても問題なかったはずだ。なのに君はその後も10年以上身を隠していたんだろう。
Oski couldn't argue with that either. Though he'd never been punished for it, his crime was and always would be set in stone.
俺もまあ今までずっと身を潜めていたからな。
Oski could do nothing but agree. For a part of him, it also felt relieved once the secrets he'd been hiding finally came to light and he'd confessed to his crime.
それと同じさ。だからもう放っておいてくれないか。
なおちゃん、一つだけ約束してくれないか。
Oski knew there was no longer any way he could stop Naori.
絶対は難しいな。まあ法を犯すつもりはみじんもないから安心しなよ。
Naori smiled. It was the same smile I'd always shown everyone, yet now it looked so fake, so empty. Like he was hinting that he'd possibly committed a crime without breaking the law.
まさかなおちゃん。
Naori simply shifted his eyes away in response.
ダメだよそれは。そんなことで楽になっちゃいけない。
お前ができなかったからか。
Oski instinctively grabbed his wrist.
俺は自分のことくらい自分で決めるさ。
With that, Naori got to his feet and headed for the door.
だから邪魔をしないでくれ、若女将。
He was standing right outside the hut.
外は寒いだろう。中に入るといい。
You entered the hut at Naori's urging.
なおちゃん、リヒトの
関係ないさ。俺が言ったわけじゃなし。
Naori shrugged.
だったら戻りましょう。
You tugged at Naori's hand.
リヒトと一緒に先に戻ってくれないか。
ダメよ。
You shook her head.
もう誰も失いたくないのよ。
悪い。
Naori passed right by you.
なおちゃん。
Masuki raced outside after Naori. Naori was making his way down the path leading deeper into the mountains, even though it was completely buried in snow.
なおちゃん。
追ってくるなよ、リヒト。お前はともかく若女将の服装じゃ。
どうしてよ。
You came to a stop right next to Masuki and shouted.
悪いと思っているのなら。
文字通り墓の下まで持っていかなければならない秘密が多すぎてね。
そんなの。なおちゃんが不幸せだったら意味がないじゃない。
俺はいいんだよ。もうやりたいことも残っていないしね。それじゃ。
Naori turned his back on his old friends.
待ってよ、なおちゃん。リヒト。
行かせてやってくれないか。
Looking at Naori's back as he fled, Masuki saw someone else. A young man who'd run away from this place in much the same manner well over a decade ago.
なおちゃん。
And so Masuki called out to him. Naori stopped in his tracks.
必ずまた会おう。
気が向いたらな。
Naori Kuroya waved back to them, and then disappeared into the snowy white darkness. God damn. God damn. Yeah, no, that was good. I'm very glad I saw that. Very glad. So we do get some closure on Naori's story. But now it's time for the true and final ending. That's to tell Masuki, no.
まさき、そのくらいにしておけ。
Let it rest, big man. Yoro is here right now. Yep, we've seen all that. Yep, here we go. I parked in my driveway. The lights were on in the living room. Seconds later, I popped a cigarette between my lips and got out. I puffed a cloud of smoke into the air. It's all over now, huh? I doubted that bastard would ever be getting out again. It was unlikely there was another juicy opportunity gift wrapped for him this time around, after all. And besides, Yaginuma wouldn't dare make the same mistake twice. As such, I no longer had a part to play in what was to come.
これでよかったんだよな。どこ。
I exhaled those words with my smoke. But as expected, I got no answer. Yura had a mother and a father now. Though the path she'd taken to get there was far from ordinary, she was growing up into the kind of daughter any parent would be proud to have. It was all thanks to the Saigasas. The debt I owed them was precisely the reason I dared not reveal the truth. She didn't need the kind of instability I'd invite into her life. No, I just wanted her to live in peace as a member of the Saigasa family. I took my cigarette and squashed it, along with all remaining sentiments in my heart. What lingering regrets I had went up in smoke along with the rest of the cigarette. March 1971, damn, 7 years later, alright. The Tokyo detention house has carried out its final execution before being moved from Sugamo to Osaka. The convict's name was Makoto Roshiki. A serial killer responsible for the murders of numerous pregnant women after the war. He was initially arrested in 1956, only to escape on his way to prison. He was arrested again in 1964, upon which he was sent to the public prosecutor's office, prosecuted, tried, and quickly sentenced to death without further incident. Makoto Orochi exhibited no signs of distress on the morning of his execution. He merely looked to a guard and requested a priest. Normally, execution chambers are outfitted with Buddhist chapels where monks can recite sutras to the convicts. It was there that Orochi was granted his audience with a priest. However, Orochi rejected the priest's pleas to confess his sins and repent. Instead, he simply said one thing.
私はベアトリーチェのもとへ。
Then, without another word, he went off to face his execution. Imperio. Okay, okay. What you got for me?
くだらねえ。
Oh, damn, Reiji. I noticed that hair getting grayer. Dude's getting old. Also, new car. Okay, moving up in the world. Nice. That was my impression of the article I'd found in the local news section of the paper. Concerning the details of Makoto Orochi's execution, which had been carried out yesterday morning. Man, it's been ages since that case was closed. I lit a smoke and dragged on it for a while as I leaned against my car. Guess this means it really is over, doesn't it? 20 years had come and gone since he'd murdered Yukiko, give or take. But now, no one else would ever die at his hand.
もうそんなに経っちまったか。
No wonder I felt old. Yukiko remained eternally young in my memories, yet here I was, truly getting up there in the years. But that was all in the past, long after my time had thawed and begun ticking again after it had been frozen in place for so long by obsessions. Maybe that was why time felt like it had flown right by me. And the more years that passed, the fainter my recollection of her face grew. I didn't think that was a sign I was heartless, though. After all, it wasn't a crime to move past a tragedy. She wasn't the only one whose face was fading from memory. It's been 15 years since we met. I wondered how she would have looked now had she lived. Maybe I could wager a guess by picturing the woman who'd been turned into girl and shell. That wasn't much of a difference from how she'd appeared in life. A woman who stopped aging. That was Makoto Orochi's Beatrice. Numerous investigations had been concluded to locate the real girl and shell over the past several years, but all of them had hit dead ends. Much as I wished we could give her a proper burial, who knew if that day would ever come. I stubbed out my cigarette in the car's ashtray. My Beatrice was different from his. Maybe we were the same in the sense that we'd both been obsessed with her. However, unlike Dante's Beatrice, Toko Kichiki and I had been together in life. Though that said, it was utterly ridiculous that I felt any sort of rivalry with him, and I knew it.
さて。
I was about to toss the newspaper into the car when I suddenly caught eye of the date. March 4th. It's already that day again, huh? Though I've been planning to drive, I figured I could take a walk today instead. Wasn't like I had any pressing business to attend to anyway. I chucked the newspaper onto the passenger seat and locked the door. Then, after checking to make sure the house was locked and secured, I straightened out my coat collar and marched off.
私がそれに気づいたのはいつだったろうか。昔々、私がまだ小さな子供だった頃、大き
Isn't
な
that
事件に巻き込
Toko's
まれた
voice
ことがあっ
actor?
た。
Now
近所
doing
で頻
the
発していた
voice of
誘
a
拐事
grown
件
up
だった。
Iraha? That's
私はあの時、確か当時よく遊んでいた子と別れ、家路に着こうとしていた。そして、ふと振り返った私の目に、大人に連れて行かれる友達の姿が見えたのだ。私は友達の後を追い、情けないことに共に囚われてしまった。当時の私はあまりにも子供で、あまりにも直感で行動していた。でもそれは今でもそうかもしれないけれど、友達と共に地下道に閉じ込められ、 私は大変な思いをした。パン一つで飢えをしのいだり、誰かの死体があったり。ただよほど怖かったのだろうか、詳細はよく覚えていなかった。それでもはっきりと覚えているのは、助けてくれたあの人の大きな手。ああ、そうだ。それからだ。私が家にいてもどこか違うと思うようになったのは、父さんも母さんもとても優しい。法屋にある大魔女学院に通いたいと私がわがままを言った時も、嫌な顔
You
一
ended up
つ
going
せ
to
ずに
Oba.
勉強を頑張ったらねと言ってくれた。
Yeah, so we're gonna
も
see
ち
like
ろ
a
ん叱
modern
ら
day
れること
sprite of
もあっ
her.
たけれど、それでも私は
And she's
この
gonna
家
look
族の一
eerily
員だっ
similar to
た。
Toko, isn't she?
大魔女学院に入り、新しい生活が始まった。幼なじみのはるかちゃんも一緒だった。新しい友人もできて、最初の1年はとても快適に過ごせた。2年になったある日のことだ。両親が自宅に不在の折、私は居間に残されていた封筒を手に取ってしまったのだ。中には戸籍謄本が入っていた。そこに私が両親の本当の娘ではないということが記されていた。ああ、やはりそうなのだと思った。不思議とショックは受けなかった。すでに直感で分かっていたことだったから。自分でも驚くほど素直に戸籍謄本に記されていた養子というものを受け入れていた。ただ一つ気になったのは、養子であっても記載されているだろうはずの実の両親についてが空白だったこと。私が学院の図書室などで調べた本には、孤児など両親が不明の場合はよく起こることだとあった。私は橋の下で拾われた子なのだろうか。両親には感謝している。でもそれでも本当の両親を知りたいという気持ちとは別だ。私の起源、それを知りたいと願うのは罪ではないだろう。まずは手がかりを見つけなければならない。一つだけ
Oh my
つてがあった。
god. She went to someone to.
私を地下から助け出してくれた探偵さん。つてというほどではないのかもしれない。だけれど他に探偵という職業についている人を知らなかった。
I discovered I adopted.
あ
Could
の
you
人
help
だ
me
った
figure
ら
out who my.
私の起源を見つけてく
Could
れ
you
る。
help me figure out who my parents are?
だけれどあの人の名前を知らなかった。私は自宅で職業別電話帳をめくり、近くで探偵業を営んでいる人の
And
住
she's
所を
approaching
調
him
べ
when she's
た。
like around 15, right?
休みの
Which
日
is
になるとそこ
similar
へ
to
出
the
かけ、
age when like
外から伺
Toko
ってあの
approached
人の
him
姿を探した。
and said, "Help me find who I truly
調
am,"
布にも
right?
府中や三鷹にも武蔵野まで足を伸ばしても見つからなかった。私は捜索の範囲を23区まで広げた。探偵事務所の数は一気に増えた。休みの日だけではなく、放課後や学院へ行く前などわずかな時間も使って探し続けた。そしてある朝、杉並区にあるという探偵事務所へ向かった私の前にあの人が現れた。普通の民家の玄関先、車に寄りかかって新聞を眺めている男の人。間違いない。昔のことで顔もろくに覚えてはいなかったけれど、あの時私を助けてくれたのはこの人だ。想像していたよりも若く見えた。大人の男の人というのは変わらないけれど、表札には 時坂と記されている。調べた探偵事務所の名前と同じだ。男の人が動き出した。車に乗るのかと思ったけれど、歩いて敷地の外に出ようとしている。とっさに私は植え込みの陰に隠れた。なぜだろう。調査を依頼したくてここへ来たというのに。すぐそばを通り過ぎていく男の人。どうしよう。悩んでいる時間は短かった。交差点を曲がっていく男の人を確認し、立ち上がる。見失ってしまう前に追いかけないと。
He was on his way to Toko's grave, wasn't he? I'd assume. So how'd it feel getting tailed? Asked the girl. Go on. Yeah.
まるで尾行だ。先を行く男の人の背中を追いながら、そんなことを考えた。住宅街を抜け、吉祥寺の方へ向かっている。私もその後をゆっくりとついていった。吉祥寺駅の近くまでやってきた。男の人は時折立ち止まりつつもまっすぐ歩いていく。彼が歩みを止めるたびに私は慌てて物陰に隠れた。見つかってもいいのだけれど、なんだか気まずかった。なんだかとても恥ずかしい。できたばかりの国鉄の高架を抜け、井の頭公園へ男の人は歩いていく。私は完全に声をかけるタイミングを逸していた。
Oh, is she gonna sit
桜
down
の
at the
開花前
bench?
だからか、公園には人影はまばらだ。このままついていったらいずれ見つかってしまう。どうしよう。私はしばし考えた末、分かれ道で横に入った。男の人が入っていた道はしばらく分岐がない。こちらをかけていけば先に。私は走った。短めの白いスカートを翻さないように気をつけながら。
Yep, there's the bench.
池のほとりに出た。まだ男の人は来ていない。そばにあったベンチに腰を下ろし、呼吸と気持ちを落ち着ける。跳ねた髪を直していると、背後から足音が近づいてきた。今だ。私は勢いをつけてくるりと振り返る。
Mm-hmm.
やあ、探偵さん。
Yep.
いや、随分と遠回りをしたのだね。おかげさまで足が棒になってしまいそうだよ。驚いた表情の男の人。ああ、やっぱりこの人だ。私を闇の中から救い出してくれたのは。驚いている間に続ける。私がこの人を探していた理由。探してほしいんだ。
Yep, I knew it was gonna be that fucking
私を
line.
本当のね。
God damn. Yeah. It all comes full circle. Fuck. Yeah, that was fucking good. God damn. I'm just waiting to see if the critics actually acknowledge the fact that Toko's voice actor is the same person. Saigasa. Misa Nakahara is also Sanma Aji, which that pretty much confirms all I need to know there. And then Tokuchiki, yep. Yep. There it is. God damn. That was very, very fucking good. The ending being full circle like that is... Man. That's just one of those endings where I'm honestly just kind of speechless. Or I just have to like... I just kind of have to sit back and be like, yeah? Of course that's how it ends. Like, no notes. That was... I genuinely could not imagine a better way to end that. True ending song, Ruri, the Azure Bird, and Ruri being the name Toko wanted to give her. Ah. That's the thing, I have kind of like conflicting feelings overall. Like, I'm trying to think like how I would overall rate this game, you know? And the thing is, like, the premise of it, the premise of the entire series, right, from the first game, like, I was never that hooked into as far as Toko is concerned. But I think that serves more as a complaint of the first game, since she was the main focus of the first game. Whereas, I suppose Ira here is truly the main focus of this game. You can't tell Ira's story without Toko's involvement, clearly. So I don't think it's fair to bring this game down any because of my feelings towards, you know, the whole premise behind Reiji and Toko's relationship. God, it was so good. And the way that the fact that they introduced this, like, and the stars kept spinning, and the stars keep spinning. Go on. That's the new title screen. Yep. Yep. Yeah, no, this story was told exceptionally well. And honestly, the way everything kind of came together, the only thing there's still kind of loose ends on is like what exactly was going on with Humia, why he had that painting, right? I'm not still kind of in the dark about that. But overall, I don't think it matters that much in the end. Like, I think we can kind of get the gist of it. I mean, we can get the gist as to what Fumiya's whole thing was and how that played into, you know, Chizuru's disdain of Toko and Toko feeling uncomfortable in that household, you know, having a quote-unquote mother who hated her and a quote-unquote father who was attracted to her. That is the thing, though. That is the thing. I am curious as to why Fumiya's like clearly Fumiya had some kind of obsession with Toko, right? And obviously we can understand how that plays into him being the first person to take Iraha. But what was his plan after that? Was it just to try to make a move on her? Like, was he gonna go that far with it? Like, what was the move? Was it just to have, like, a daughter-like figure back there again? That he'd probably start cranking it to eventually? I don't know. That's the one thing that's kind of left unanswered, but I think it's something that ultimately doesn't really need to be answered in full. Because you can kind of pick up the details on your own. Maybe you won't have the full picture of it, but it's not the most obscure thing to figure out. I don't know. I've genuinely loved the journey this series has took me on. You know, part 1 was like the big, you know, was, you know, part 1 was good, right? It introduced me to... Part 1 was definitely good. I still stand by that. I still think the whole setup with Toko and Reiji's relationship was weird. Not a huge fan of that. But I think that's why I look back at part 1 the way I do. Part 2... And that's the thing, part 2, for the most part, the story of part 2 was kind of detached. That is the thing about the cases in part 2 and 3, the like main cases, the main body of the story, is that the cases are kind of like detached from the actual like, from the original storyline that the first game sets up. But it's always like towards the end of the game, it all ties back together. Because, like, you needed to know the story behind Hitogata and everything that happened there to understand who Naori was and why he was doing what he did and why he took the daughter of Toko, right? And the same with this game, you needed to know the story of Sei Maizono and how she was, you know, and her skills as this art restorer and how... Because without understanding who Sei Maizono was and just how, you know, talented she truly was, you wouldn't understand. It might seem like too much of a cop-out at the end to be like, oh, she crafted this master replica. But it's through, you know, the string of murders that you realize just and through the forgeries and whatnot, you understand just the level that this woman's on and how it ultimately ties back in. And it's because of... like, Sei Maizono, like, being one of the people whose daughters went missing, right? That it all kind of tied back into everything. at the end there. That's one thing I gotta give part 2 and 3 props for, is like the main mysteries at the beginning of the games are very good. I really enjoy them. And then watching everything come together, watching all these loose ends come together is fucking great. And watching it all come full circle at the end. That's the thing, like, I'm trying to think of like anything to like, I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm honestly, anytime I try to think about like what to say about this game, I'm genuinely left speechless by the way it ended, in a very good way. Because not once did I ever expect the full circle moment. That's the thing, I didn't really have any expectations to how it would end. I really didn't. Right? Like, genuinely, I didn't see the whole adoptive parents thing coming. Because there was a point where, like, I believed that Reiji's daughter was one of the girls that ended up dead. I didn't think for a second that, oh, Naori left them in the care of someone else. It makes a lot of sense, especially when Naori himself explains why, but it's something I didn't even figure. So I'll say this game did a lot better at, like, taking me by surprise with its plot twists, right? With part 2, and I loved part 2, I managed to see a lot of the twists coming. I managed to figure out a lot of the big twists myself. It was kind of predictable, but also I don't think predictable is a bad thing. This game really, honestly, twists and turns just kept coming, and I wasn't expecting the vast majority of them. Very good. Very fucking well done. I mean, obviously, the music, phenomenal. The art style, gorgeous. The voice acting was great. The characters were very well done. I don't think there was like any character in here that I genuinely like didn't like. Like, there's characters like I don't like them, but it's not like that's just like the way they're written, right? They're meant to be unlikable, but like I don't think any of them were poorly written or poorly done. It's like, you know, I can't imagine the story playing out without any of these characters, right? Watching everything come together like that. That's just the thing. That's just the thing. I keep coming back to that one point. Is this game truly brought everything together. And I think that's ultimately why I'm able to forgive why Fumiya isn't, and his whole obsession wasn't really explained in depth, is because at the end of the day, it doesn't truly matter. Because his obsession kind of dies with Toko, right? It dies there. He's got nothing to do with this girl here. He's got nothing to do with Iraha. She is someone completely different who has no connection to him. No real connection to him. He believes there's a connection there, but there's no real connection to him. I don't know, man. Like, I'm kind of bordering on just saying it's a 10 out of 10 amazing game. Because, I mean, let's be perfectly honest. You know, I talked about it before. There was 3 of these recording sessions I did within a 1-week span because I was just fucking hooked into it. Because I was absolutely pulled in to the main mystery of it all. And then getting to the end and going through all the endings and exploring how it goes deeper and deeper and deeper. Very good. Very, very fucking good. So honestly, I think it's entirely fair if I do just slap it with a 10 out of 10. Honestly, I do think it's entirely fair if I do that. Because that's another thing with games like these just in general. Like, the final chapter in a story. They always hit me so much harder. There's a reason why you'll see me give a lot of praise to, like, games that come at the end of a series compared to games in like the beginning or middle. And that's particularly if they're done well, but when they are done well, it's just ugh, I hate to sound like a broken record, but man, watching everything come together. But yeah, they absolutely stuck the landing on this and so much more. It's really fucking good. It's really fucking good. It's just really fucking good, dude. I don't know. I'm trying to think of any other way to describe this. I'm trying to think of any minor nitpick I could bring to the table to where I'd be like, well, what about this? And no, not really. Obviously, I joked a lot about, like, Matsuki needs to back off my girl Yukari. But, you know, at the end of the day, he ain't make moves on her until she was an adult, alright? And even then, he wasn't really making moves on her. It's her who started warming up to him. I still love that scene when they're like sharing the futon, right? And she's all nervous and like scared, all nervous and heart racing and shit, and he's just passed the fuck out. It doesn't bother him in the slightest. I love that. I love that. So yeah, ultimately at the end of the day, I think I'm gonna do it. I think I'm just gonna say, you know what? This was a fucking 10. This was a fucking 10. It was a phenomenal story. The initial mystery of it all with Sei Maizono and her whole story was incredibly interesting. It kept me heavily invested into the story itself. And then everything that's happened in the time skip, you know, throughout all the endings has been fucking wonderful. I've loved it. You know, in the wedding scene during the grand ending, because obviously the wedding still happens, right? After Orochiki gets, you know, cuffed and sent back to prison, right? The wedding still happens. Orochiki doesn't need to die for the wedding to happen. But it's like, that was part of the grand ending. That's not part of this true ending, right? But seeing that wedding scene, and obviously I was losing shit over the outfits because they're really good, but Yukari being able to reunite with Yukiko was very fucking sweet. Yo, Kyoko being able to share a nice moment with Yukiko in the wake of everything, to show Yukiko that there's no ill will between them. Each ending like wrapped up things well in their own ways, right? Because like the normal ending obviously doesn't wrap up shit, but it's not meant to. It's the normal ending, but it's more so to present you with the fact that something's definitely blossoming between Yukari and Masaki. The grand ending to show you that, you know, Kyoko and Nozomi's happily ever after. You get the Yukiko Yukari reunion, very sweet. And then the true ending that just really brings it all full circle. And then of course the other ending with Naori, where you finally get some closure on his side of the story. So maybe that is the thing. Maybe there are other endings that I'm missing out on. The guide I've been using doesn't really have all the endings laid out like the guide I had for part 2 did. So as of right now, I don't have any plans to go through each individual ending like I did with part 2. Even though I do feel like this game is definitely worth it. This game is definitely worth it. But yeah, at this point, I'm just rambling on and repeating myself. So I'm gonna wrap it up here. This has been my playthrough of the Shell Part 3. I hope you enjoyed it. And I'll see y'all in whatever it is I play next. Until then, peace.